Hey everyone, and welcome back to Couch Confidentials, the podcast where we get into the nitty-gritty of Martech with people shaping the industry. I'm your host, Matthew Niederberg, and today we're sitting down with Derek Slager, or as we say here in the Netherlands, Derek Slager. It's a beautiful Dutch name, and he has Dutch roots. Anyway, he's the CTO and co-founder of Amperity, located in the beautiful heart of Seattle. Today, we're diving into Amperity's origin story, how they foster a strong company culture that connects with customers, and most importantly, their big announcement from December of last year, the Customer Data Cloud. I mean, what's the vision behind CDC? How will it redefine the CDP space? And what does this mean for the future of customer data? Stay tuned for the conversation you do not want to miss. Hey, Derek, welcome to Couch Confidentials. Before we dive in, can you give us a quick introduction about yourself and, of course, a little bit about your Dutch roots, especially with a last name like Slager? I'll say it in Dutch here. And especially around how did you get started with Amperity?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me. And so I'm the CTO and co-founder here at Amperity. We're headquartered in Seattle, Washington, which has some uncharacteristically blue skies today. It's a real background.
It's lovely, man.
And yeah, you picked up on my last name, and I appreciate you pronouncing it correctly because I can't, because I didn't grow up in the Netherlands. But my ancestors, came from there. They were all dairy farmers in the north of the country in Friesland, and that they all they found their way here eventually in a dairy farm community. And I grew up in a dairy farm community that just happened to be close enough to Seattle's technical scene that I was able to kind of stumble into that.
Oh, wow.
Sort of the rest, as they say, is history. But I've
as they say in Dutch.
Yeah, indeed. It's been really fun working on Amperity. It's been about 9 years that we've been working on the company, and we've seen a lot of growth and a lot of success. And obviously, it's been an interesting 9 years, however you look at it, right? From kind of all the ups and downs in the market and all the changes in customer data and privacy and CDPs and all these things that we've kind of had a front row seat on. So hard to get bored along a journey like this.
I can imagine. It feels like going from the Wild West to modern days in just like 9 years, and a 9 years of time span. It must feel a little bit overwhelming, especially with regulations like you mentioned. I think 9 years ago that they were being discussed, but weren't as active. But we'll get into that a lot later. Hey, but I think a lot of the tools that we see in the category right now, if we specifically look at CDPs, they all have like their own kind of origins. What was the first kind of problems that Amperity set out to solve for their initial customer set?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and in all honesty, as far as I can remember, when we started the company, I'd never heard of CDP like as a category, right? And really, like, we started Amperity to try and solve a problem that seemed pretty obvious, which is every consumer brand we talked to while we were researching the business said that they wanted to have a unified view of customer, to power great customer experience and do all kind of the obvious things that you would do if you had one of those. But despite everybody wanting one, nobody had one. And that seemed really stupid, right? And so, Amperity's kind of whole reason to exist was, hey, let's go try and solve that problem, and let's try and do something about that in a way that's a little bit different than what's been done before, and really focus on kind of the quality and comprehensiveness of how we bring data together. Over time, we started, of course, to learn about the CDP category and see, some of the other things in it. But to your point, it was rare to find somebody else in the category who sort of had that same perspective as us, right? Like, you look at some of the, the early folks who were in the category, like, Teliums and segments and things like that, great tools for sure. But from our perspective, is like, oh, those are tag managers, and they're kind of throwing some profile capabilities on the backside. And that didn't really necessarily fit our definition of what a CDP was, or maybe to put that differently, that certainly wasn't an attempt to solve the same problem that we were solving. And of course, conversely, we weren't trying to solve the problem that they were solving either. So it's not a statement of right or wrong. It's just a statement of we could both sort of tell a CDP story, but from very different angles. And then, of course, you had people attacking it from the other side, where they were really focused on kind of richness of activation and kind of multi-channel orchestration, but they too were kind of working around that kind of core data problem. And so in many ways, whether you attach it to the CDP category or not, like we've always felt like a little bit of an outlier in terms of our kind of extreme focus on getting the data right. And And of course, that's not to say, we haven't needed to be very responsive to customers' needs that fit in with the rest of the CDP category. Of course, we don't just get the data right. And there's a lot of capabilities we provide to be able to kind of have connectivity with the ecosystem, and very rich capabilities these days around campaign orchestration and other things. So we've come a long way, but for us, the reason CDP as a category ever bothered to be talked about was because it represented a problem space. And I would observe that, as we sit here speaking in 2025, I think that problem is still pretty ubiquitous, right? And
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
whether or not we can just declare that sort of CDP as a category has succeeded or failed, I think if CDP was meant to kind of solve for customer data problems holistically, as a platform, right
Yeah.
there in the name. Boy, it's hard to give it an A plus, through a historical lens here.
Yeah. And I think AI is not helping the case either. I think it's exposing more of the underlying problems that even CDPs have suffered from over the last 10 years. And that's just poor data quality.
Right.
Even if you want to build your models on AI, you need to do that double check. And I don't think CDPs have ever been in a position to really be concerned about the quality of data that they're processing. But it's definitely interesting. And as you mentioned, like 9 years ago, absolutely. I remember first time I got in touch with Segment, for example, they were an API funnel. You could connect all these different sources and push into the different destinations. And then suddenly they evolved. And it was, I kind of, this is like this bow tie image that I have in my mind, that everybody started very unique in their own space and they all converged in this CDP black hole, I want to call it, I guess, or just this convergence of we all do the same, we all look the same. And for the last, I think for the last 6 to probably even 12 months, you're slowly seeing them taking their own roots again, becoming more unique in their own game. But it's interesting to see, and CDC is the customer data cloud is definitely one of those, and it's something, definitely want to pick your brain on later. But as you mentioned, the wonderful skyline that you have behind you is absolutely amazing. I mean, if there's something that really gets me excited, it's a beautiful skyline. Washington State, though, I've dealt with being in the Netherlands, I've dealt with quite a few people who live in Washington State. And as you sit there in the office, Amperity has their headquarters there. But I think about the awesome culture that Washingtonians, how should I say it?
Washingtonians.
Washingtonians have. They're close to nature. The drive is there, just as in Silicon Valley, but it just seems to be a little bit of a different attitude. I mean, how does that, your location and your internal culture, strengthen your relationship with your customers? Does it really drive a certain set of customers towards you, or are you seeing anything different there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, look, I'll start by saying the stereotypes are generally true, right? Like, Seattle is more laid back than the Bay Area.
Grunge bands from the 90s is all I can remember,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were all listening here too. And no doubt, I mean, I think the Bay Area has a certain swagger, right? And that's the place where the companies who are going to be talking really loud about we're changing the world, are all going to be standing on their various soapboxes. And look, I think sometimes it's funny. I'll be talking to somebody. I'll say, "Oh, the company's headquartered in Seattle." There's like Seattle. Like, there's no interesting technology happening in Seattle. And if I look in this direction, I can see Microsoft headquarters. If I turn around and look behind me, I see Amazon's headquarters. And
oh wow,
we're counting market cap in the trillions on that.
Yeah.
If you look at the cloud and sort of the underlying platforms, that's almost entirely coming out of this area. And so kind of absent the swagger, Seattle has been hugely impactful, on the tech ecosystem. But we're just not very flashy about it, and I remember, kind of in the early days as Microsoft was having its big run up. And of course, as part of that, Microsoft minted a lot of, they were known as sort of Microsoft millionaires. And the Microsoft millionaires around here didn't buy Porsches. They bought Subaru Outbacks, right? Which is just, that's kind of,
and their woolen socks and, yeah.
Totally. So, it's laid back. It's not a flashy place. People People don't value those things here, and I think you also see it, from a business perspective. It's the kind of place where we build durable foundations, right? Again, the cloud was really built here. AWS and Azure are completely homed here, and a lot of Google's teams that work on Google's cloud are here in the Seattle area as well for the same reason, right? They bring talent with each other, and also people stay longer at companies, right? The average tenure at a company in Seattle is reasonably longer than it is at a company in the Bay Area and things like that. And so, the cycle times are a little bit slower, but I think when you're building these durable foundations, that kind of fits with the culture of Seattle. And we kind of think of ourselves as really building foundations for customer data. And so I think the culture and the stereotypes about Seattle, I think, tend to fit what we do and how we're trying to impact the world of customer data very well.
Yeah, and so in the past I did some work for Patagonia, and I
Yeah,
knew at the time that they signed up with Amperity. I was like, wow,
yeah,
you
long
guys
time
are from
customer.
from Washington and from Washington State and Patagonia. I was like, they must be having a ball kind of in the boardroom, just relaxed. They're probably wearing their slippers and their shorts, talking about data at high level, because like I mentioned, the attitude and the culture has to be so relaxed. And I've got nothing to compare it to. I think I've had one layover in Seattle, and the only other references that I have is flying from Boeing Field and Tacoma in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and the other one's the TV show Frasier. So look, I've got nothing to compare it to. Just the stories, the grunge bands, when I was a kid, all the stories coming from, I think even was Nirvana, did they set up shop were they from Seattle? I don't know. Seattle was a big scene with grunge music, but I
They
think that's
were,
a
yeah,
different
Nirvana.
podcast.
Yeah, Nirvana. Yeah, they were from a small town called Aberdeen. Maybe a couple hours drive from here, and but yeah, they made their name, playing in Seattle. So yeah,
Yeah.
we the Seattle band.
Oh man, I need to put it on my bucket list to visit there. I've got a lot of places now after speaking to so many people, events to go to, but definitely Seattle. I need to put it up there. Hey, listen, Parody. I have to be honest. Here in the Netherlands, like I said, I did do a small tenure with Patagonia. That was in Amsterdam. That's where I first. That's like 5 years ago, and that's when I first learned about Amperity. The footprint within Europe, or at least the Netherlands, of what I can speak of, is not pretty big. But I think the
Mhm.
goals are now to grow even larger. And one of the main questions I have that I challenge each CDP on is, what do you guys do about consent? I mean, GDPR is a big thing here. How do you guys deal with that? Especially in the US, you have various states with various rules. Is this something that you built into the solution, or how should I view that within Amperity?
Yeah, it's a great question, and yeah, I mean, for a lot of Amperity's history, we did spend the bulk of our energy, in North America and in the U.S. in particular. And part of the reason for that is because of our strengths in kind of building data foundations. In many ways, the bigger the problem, the better we fit.
Yeah.
So. There's a lot of very large companies in the US, and many of them are multinational, right? And so in some sense, we've had a lot of experience, kind of working out in different regions, even from the very early days of the company. One of my first business trips was to France to visit one of our customers, or a division of one of our customers over there. But a lot of that was kind of connected back to the work that we were doing, in a particular region. And then obviously, as we've grown the business and found, different ways to bring value to customers, we're certainly past the point where it's all about the data foundation, or it's
Yeah.
only relevant to the biggest customers in the world. And so we've expanded the types of customers that we're able to serve. And as part of that, that's fueled over the past couple of years some expansion in terms of us building our brand and building out our customer base internationally. And so we have a team, in Europe, we have a team in Australia. Coming back to privacy, as a consequence, even, back, I think it was May of 2018 when GDPR went into effect, right? And so kind of in the earliest days of the company, we were, working with our customers that had an international presence on GDPR and all the various things. So we were able, fortunately, to factor some of those things, kind of directly into our core architecture, and thinking about things like, how how data gets erased, and then also how we kind of manage and coordinate with that data change across different systems. So given our focus, unlike maybe kind of a more sort of, tag manager DNA type CDP where they're collecting data directly, historically we're composing data from, dozens and dozens of different systems. And so we become a very important part of a compliance and governance lifecycle because we can see the whole picture. We know where all the data is. And so, we have a number of different capabilities around being able to manage that, including helping to facilitate workflow around that. Because I can tell you, having worked with some of the biggest companies in the world, some of this stuff still runs on a spreadsheet because
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of manual steps, right? If you say delete me, it may take months for some companies to kind of go and run an end-to-end process around that. Part of that is just even knowing where the problem is. And you have to consider also, if it takes you 6 weeks of coordinated effort across different parts of your team to go and finish that, what happens when new records are coming in that sort of may fill into that? So there's a whole bunch of things, practically speaking, we've put in, including sort of being able to suppress and stop new things from coming in so that, people's, rights and preferences are being, expressed and honored, even as some of those things are playing out. And so, yeah, this is an area where kind of, given sort of our comprehensiveness and ubiquity of data, it's been sort of a natural and obvious place for us to spend a lot of energy. And that's paid off well, right? We're seeing that, in Australia right now, there have been some updates to the Australian privacy principles, of late. And it's been great for us to be able to kind of go and help our customers and be on the front foot there. I think the only other thing I'd say is part of the reason this has all, been helpful for our business is because, part of our premise as a company was, hey, privacy is going to trend in a certain direction, and we want to be on the right side of that, right? A lot of people were trying to solve their data foundation problem with third-party data, 10 years ago, and we kind of made a bet that that's just not a viable strategy as things continue to evolve and change. And so, I think certainly that's a thing we called right. We built our capabilities around being able to really extract the most value out of a customer's owned data, and we don't rely on kind of third-party data sets that are sort of increasingly of lower and lower quality over time.
Yeah. Oh, that's definitely interesting because there's been a lot of activities. I don't want to say positive, but mostly negative in the CDP market, just because of the complexity of the product. I've tried to explain this in so many times. I'll save the listeners of my thoughts around this because it just gets kind of long. The basic premise is that CDP is just the scope of the product is so wide. If you lay it on top of an organization's activities, that it's very hard to really focus down and get one thing right. You need to get everything right. And you need to make sure that everybody works together in getting that right. But with all the merging and pivoting and shutting, well, I don't think that anyone has shut down yet, but let's say just the merging and pivoting of a lot of CDPs in the market. What are your personal or what are Amperity's kind of thoughts around the kind of tumult in the market at the moment? And how does Amperity fit into that picture?
Yeah. It's a great question. And in some sense, I don't pay a lot of attention to it. That might sound a little bit silly.
Oh, you're all the way up in Seattle. No, I get it. You're just like, yeah, we got our own scene here.
Yeah, perhaps that is the nature of being in Seattle and being, being inwardly focused. Let me focus on what I can control. I guess it goes back to what you talked about just moments ago, right? This definition of CDP. If you were to go and sort of absorb the idealistic definition of CDP, right? And sometimes people will say, here's what a CDP can do for you. And I think I read those things, and I think other people in and around the industry read those things and they're like, that's not one thing. That's like 5 things,
Yeah.
and not only is it 5 things, but it's 5 things that you do have to figure out how to organizationally put together. And that's typically not going to fit in one department. That's just a hard problem, period. Yeah. And, for all the, complexity and confusion in the category definition itself, it's probably just too big as a category, right? And so I think what we're seeing in the market is people recognizing what I think customers have gotten smarter about over the last few years, which is I'm not going to find one thing that's going to solve all my problems.
Yeah.
And look, I'll tell you, I see a lot of customers that have 3 or 4 CDPs.
I would love to see their budget, end of year budget. Yeah. Like, dude, you can buy like 4 CDPs, do it.
Right. Right. And in some sense, that sounds ridiculous. And through the lens of the category, Of course it is. But if you've got three CDPs and one of them's really focused on collecting and routing data, and the other one's focused on building and extending a really strong data foundation, and the other one's focused on a bunch of kind of sophisticated orchestration, it sounds less crazy. So in order to make that sound coherent, we just had to sort of remove that category definition. And so I think what we see happening with this kind of people are going and finding their place to be in the category, right? And some people are kind of attaching their capability to another company's, sort of domain and saying, hey, within a context, maybe within a call center context, there's a lot of additional value we can bring with our technology. And so let's group those things together and go, and spend our energy there. And I think that makes sense. And I think, in our case, you touched on this earlier, we've kind of evolved our language to speak to sort of customer data cloud. And perhaps no surprise, we're really leaning into our ability to be data foundational, which is just, deeply in our DNA around kind of, hey, better data, better results. We're going to be the company that's really focused there. So we kind of go to the bottom of the category, and there's other people who are going to kind of, continue to sort of work upstream of there. And perhaps, some of us who've been around for a while, remember, Segment before Segment was a CDP, right? They were a CDI or customer data infrastructure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember, them doing a big ad campaign about, how you need customer data infrastructure. And so, before they kind of rebranded the whole thing as CDP, they were already saying, hey, we're this really important thing up here. And so I think as things are shaking out, we're just creating clearer lanes.
I think so too.
I don't
Yeah.
think it's dramatic change because, again, I think customers have gotten wise to this and realized, hey, nobody's going to give me the best of everything, and I do need to be able to put these things together. So I think this is better for everybody as we continue to kind of refine.
And I'm seeing this on working with clients. You're seeing a lot of past experience of people coming into a company saying, hey, I used to work with Amperity. Let's put Amperity on the short list without going through it. So it's just the past experience that people are bringing into their new workplaces right now are really also kind of telling, well, I don't want to say telling the narrative, but guiding the narrative on what solution they prefer to use. Exactly as you said, 5, maybe 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. Nobody had any experience and everyone was just kind of scrambling to get all these features built in. I love the metaphor that you use, that it's clearing up. The lanes are becoming more clear about where all these solutions are headed to. But, you mentioned CDP, the acronym is difficult, but then we've had a few acronyms in the category right now. And you guys thought, well, let's bring in a new one. I before we started the recording, I did make a little kind of pun towards sharing the acronym with the Center for Disease Control. I think it's headquartered in Atlanta, but
yeah, we had some discussions on that.
Yeah, I think the acronyms in the world are kind of running out. But Customer Data Cloud, you announced it, I believe, the beginning of December in 2024. Yeah. Can you kind of break down the core idea behind? I'm going to refer to it to Customer Data Cloud from now on. Can you kind of break on the core idea behind a drive for a Customer Data Cloud? And it's kind of I don't want to say fake, but can you describe what is it going to promise to deliver?
Yeah, absolutely. And tangibly for us, and this was something that we worked on for a while, a big part of what we were trying to express to the market in kind of this transition from, Amperity is just on this long, ever long list of a CDP, was to be able to kind of tell our story, more purely, and also importantly, to give it to people in a way that's consumable. So they can have just the parts that they want, right? Historically, Amperity solved this data foundational problem, did all these things on top, and it was a little bit of an all or nothing thing. And so, Amperity kind of as a CDP offering was, we were going to kind of solve your core data problem. We were going to build all these activation tools, and we were going to put a pretty comprehensive package around that.
Yeah.
And, we also had, people on our team who could help do implementation and a lot of other things. And so, CDC is and Customer Data Cloud for us is a much more modular way of expressing our capabilities to the market. So if you say, hey, I just want this one corner of the product, or I want to start in this area, or honestly, I want to be able to implement it myself, or I maybe want to choose, a particular SI partner that I have a great relationship with to kind of bring that on. All of that is kind of under our definition of CDC. So what we did, tangibly in CDC, we completely rebuilt our pricing model, right? So that you can start small and grow over time, as opposed to kind of our prior model was really
fantastic. Yeah. That fits in well to I think that the market response to people looking to get more value out of their solutions, regardless of what it is. But I've seen implementations that take maybe 6 to 12 months to get completed, but you're paying the full price right from day one. And you're wondering, where's the added benefit? So sorry to interrupt, but that's, I really like the fact that you guys are doing this modular and you can ramp up your investment.
No, that's right. And I think the other thing we saw is, look, as the market conditions evolved over the last few years, some of the reason what you just described might happen is somebody had a certain level of ambition and then their budget had to adjust, right? And so, there's been a bunch of folks in the market kind of saying, hey, maybe we need to extend timelines on some of the things that we're trying to do, or we have fewer resources than we used to. Like a lot of people in the industry, both in the technology industry and the industries that technology serves, have been doing more with less, right? Yeah. And so being more adaptable is really key. We also brought a bunch of new capabilities that we were excited to bring. We extended and enhanced a lot of the kind of data sharing capabilities that we built, so we can have very first class native zero copy integrations across kind of the key tooling that people are using foundationally, and we're continuing to extend there. We also launched a number of new real-time capabilities, which has been a big focus for us and continues to be a big focus for us in terms of kind of creating added value in terms of the ways that you can leverage that data foundation.
And just touching on that real time, I mean, it's always a heated debate. If you scroll through LinkedIn, if you go to events and you mention real time, I think sometimes I feel like I'm stuck between two camps. The very purists saying, hey, real time, the faster, the better. And the other ones keep saying, hey, why do you need real time? I think some people have mentioned even the term right time. What was the motivation around focusing on new features built around real time?
Yeah, no, I think this is, everybody's right, and it's a question of the proportion and
question of the use case. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you predicted my next statement. We've always looked at it through the lens of the use case, and that's one of the things that we're really focused on when we're thinking about product decisions and how we invest resources. We start from use cases, and we start particularly from use cases that we've talked about with customers, we've talked about with prospects, things where we have strengths, things where we have weaknesses. And I think if you go make the list of all the use cases that might pertain to kind of this big CDP story, hundreds and hundreds of use cases, there's a whole bunch of them that don't need real time. No doubt about it. And it is indeed a smaller percentage of things that truly, genuinely benefit from real time.
Yeah.
But those use cases matter, right? As an example, perhaps, if you were an airline and, there were some poor weather conditions and, you had to, cancel a flight or, some other thing operationally changes, you're going to want to know about that straight away, right? You're not going to want to advertise that flight, right? Maybe you've done a big, kind of offline batch process to find the customers that are most likely to be a target for that flight. And maybe that took, maybe that was a thing that ran with higher latency. But before you go and make a messaging decision, you probably want to factor in the fact that something just changed. So that to me is a good example of what we see in a lot of use cases, is where there's a hybrid between you're using, kind of the capabilities and the value of all of your data, to make a really smart and complex decision. Many of the things that people are doing with AI fit into that pattern, but you're also integrating that in a really neat way architecturally, so that you can action on that effectively. And that's really been kind of a big focus for how we think about real time. So for us, we've kind of interleaved real time into our architecture. I think we see other people in the category who say, oh, you want real time? Well, we have a real time thing over here. Oh, you want something other than real time, or you want more capability? We have this other thing over here. And they kind of like are coexistent things. That's just not how we wanted to do it. We wanted to make sure that it was first class, and you didn't need to think about sort of the interleave between, you don't want a real time thing getting queried by something that's half written. So there's a whole bunch of really complex coordination things that you need to do to make the system all fit together. And we didn't want to bring first class real time capabilities to our customers as sort of this bolt-on thing over in the corner. We wanted it to be really elegantly integrated into our architecture. And so that was kind of the focus of our real-time capabilities and some of the releases there as part of our CDC launch. And we're going to continue building on that as we go.
And talking about first class, and this might feel like I'm putting you guys on a pedestal, and I'm trying to remain as objective as possible. But I recently spoke to Andrea, also from Amperity, and she mentioned that you guys have Slack channels with all your customers, where you can constantly be in communication with them. And I've seen this before, but I'm just curious about the strategy behind that, but also linked to the CDC topic. How have the early responses been from customers who have been optioning in or using customer data cloud? Are you seeing a shift in how they use the product or structure their accounts, the modules that you're using?
Absolutely. We've been actually very thrilled by the response. And part of the rationale for combining, kind of the updated model in terms of kind of how things are packaged and priced with real-time capabilities. That was one of the big drivers. People wanted to be able to do more with real-time capability, but we were running into some friction with the way that things were priced. And so we had kind of records-based pricing, and then we had these different modules you had to add on. And it just didn't feel like we were finding the right fit there. And so part of the enthusiasm we've had from our customers is we've kind of aligned the model where, there's really good value exchange, and we've really kind of lowered the barrier to entry for a lot of these things. And so what's neat is now if you're a CDC customer and you have kind of a small real-time case that's really important, but it's not something that kind of necessarily defines the entirety of your customer data estate and set of use cases, you can just add on a little bit, right? And so we found that there's a lot of excitement in the channels that you mentioned have been more fun to be in because there's just more possibilities and we can be more creative in solutioning together. So yeah, it's been really exciting, and in virtually all cases where we've kind of given people the choice to kind of continue down the CDC path, the CDP path, or move to CDC. Just about everyone said, let's go in this new direction. It sounds exciting.
And those customers, I mean, a lot has been happening in the last 12 months in terms of technology, and it's definitely had an impact on the category. I don't have my my bottle of vodka here in a shot glass, but I played a drinking game once with something around AI. Every time you mention it, you need to take a shot because it just shows up everywhere. But I need to ask it. How did you guys deal with questions or requests from customers around integrating AI into Amperity, and how have you guys embedded it? I mean, can you give us some examples of some features that are powered by? And when I say AI, I don't mean machine learning. I mean, I think a lot of us who have been in the industry for a while know that a lot of it, the machine learning, the predictive part, is kind of relabeled to AI. But true AI, I think Andrea, again, the same person, gave me a good example of someone who had a question, who needed some numbers, and they used the interface of Amperity to get this. So I'm really curious about the customer's requests for this and practical implementations or uses of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm glad we're not playing an AI drinking game.
Not at your time in the morning, I think it was.
Nobody would ever be sober, because obviously that's been, kind of a dominant factor in a lot of our conversations. And for all the obvious reasons, which I won't bother to enumerate, but in the case of Amperity, given that our strength is building a data foundation, it's sort of obvious, right, that we would be one of the places where those questions would get asked. And in many cases, increasingly, we're seeing people's interest in, our capabilities around data foundation being correlated to things that they're trying to do with AI. An incredible number of our customers have deployed chatbot interfaces to kind of interface with their customers, right? And so whether you look at that from how can we augment and enhance that chat with sort of the capabilities we have around providing profile and historical information there, which is sort of obvious. But
I was just about to ask, how does Amperity integrate with chatbots, for instance?
Yeah, so we have, we've built out a very rich kind of profile API that allows us to have kind of really elegant sort of tool-oriented integration with chatbots, depending on sort of the specific patterns. So we can kind of push data in as context, or make that available offline. In other cases, that can be sort of accessed in real time, using our profile API. There's kind of different ways that you can index that data for different use cases. And then the other side of that is, if there's rich, interaction, between a customer and a chatbot, how does that data come in and inform the profile as well, right? That's also an important piece. Now, those may not be sort of the headline use cases. And of course, as you and Andrew discussed, we've been very aggressive in bringing AI capabilities, in particular AI capabilities that are powered by large language models in various forms, into our product experience. That started with introspection, right? For us, the reason it was so exciting and so obvious in many ways was our superpower at Amperity is building these really amazing data foundations. And one of the things we want you to do is explore and understand and appreciate that data asset, right? And so this was just an obvious way to kind of extend those superpowers to,
instead of just being hidden by a user interface.
Totally. And I'm going to admit I was a little skeptical, right? Because the story that you hear, a lot of people saying on stage is, oh, AI will be a democratizing technology, and, people without, technical skills are going to be able to ask and answer questions. And just between us and everybody listening here, like I kind of rolled my eyes at that. I was like, yeah, whatever. Like people will still just ask the nerds, and we'll just make the nerds more effective. But I was totally wrong, right? By the numbers, we've had this capability out in the market for quite a while now. And I've been sort of shocked. We've done some cohort analysis, and people who didn't ask many questions, right? Because maybe it was just beyond their capability, or the interface was a little bit too complicated to navigate, started to ask more questions, and you just see it going up and to the right. So kind of once you've realized, hey, I can answer my own questions, you do. And so for us, it's been really neat to see that. And that's inspired us to invest even further. So we're on our third kind of architecture for how we integrate LLMs into the application. We've built out really comprehensive evaluation frameworks, and we're super excited looking ahead because it turns out people don't want to just ask questions about their data. They also want to use those interfaces to kind of influence how things are configured and what they're doing and how they're influencing their customers. So we've got a lot of really exciting stuff teed up that you'll see hitting the market as we get into the here.
Well, now you've gone ahead and predicted my next question, but just to get back on the chatbot, one example that I saw about a year and a half ago, and I won't mention who did that, but was a conversation with a chatbot, or a user was able to communicate with a chatbot, and the chatbot, this I think was hypothetical because I've never seen it in action since, is that the chatbot was able to infer specific preferences and store them in the user profile within the CDP, which I found amazing.
Yeah.
And so let's say you've got a music store or something or another. Let's say you're searching for a new phone, and somebody says, "Hey, this is a great offer for you. It's a phone with let's say a blue color," and you said, "No. My favorite color is white or silver," and it would infer that from the conversation and store that preference as a variable within the profile. I'd love to see that in action. Is that something you guys are working on? Fingers crossed.
It is, and more to come. I think there's a variety of really interesting ways to express that. Some of those end up being kind of extracted and made literal, and some of those are a little bit more abstract, and both are important. And so, that's a very active area of investment and innovation for us.
Well said. So are there any kind of specific innovations that you can lift the veil on, considering it'd probably be like 2 or 3 weeks before this recording goes live, but anything exciting happening soon?
We have, as I already alluded to, a lot of energy going into extending and enhancing our AI capabilities, which again have been really, really, really popular with our customers. So that's just something that's always exciting because they're clamoring, and we're going to see really great adoption quickly on that and put a lot of wins on the board. We're also going to go deeper on our data foundations, right? We've never forgotten what got us here, and we have a lot of capabilities coming that'll give more flexibility in kind of how you build those data foundations. We're making it crazy easy to configure and implement the system, and building on, kind of our quick start capability. We have today in private beta a free trial capability.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of cool stuff that you'll see us kind of advancing there, and more real time and more activation capabilities. We're very much in a growth mode, and super excited about what we can bring to the market.
And what's the motivation behind the free trial, or at least the free version? Because it's a discussion that I've had with I think it was like 2 or 3 months ago. I came across this person who used to be he used to be a software engineer. He now became a data engineer. And his question was, he said, "Listen, I'd like to get learn a little bit more about CDPs in general, but they're all behind paid walls. You need a very expensive account to get started with these. So I did a little looking around. There are a few CDPs that do offer kind of what are labeled as developer accounts. Is that what you guys are getting into? Or, I mean, are we looking at small businesses who can give this a run for a fixed period of time? Or
Yeah, we've seen a mixture. Just last week, we had a new customer that had never worked with Amperity before kind of pick up a free trial, and 2 days later, they had completed sort of building a data foundation. They were sharing charts that they'd made, kind of understanding where they had kind of duplication and challenges in their data.
I must put a smile on your face then, right?
It was like the best day ever. So what's exciting for us is, look, we've worked really hard, accumulated a bunch of patents along the way, building this really, rich system that allows you to kind of put all your data together in a coherent way. And we're just excited to give more people access to it, right? And this really fits into that transition from CDP to customer data cloud, right? Part of our mission around customer data cloud is to make this available to more people, more types of companies, and again, meeting people where they are, as opposed to saying you've got to solve the whole problem. And so being able to see somebody come in and do an analysis like that in a couple of days, I mean, if they had tried to do that themselves, it would have probably taken them several quarters, and likely the results would have been worse. And so to be able to kind of offer somebody something that can give them multiple orders of magnitude improvement towards a thing that matters to their business,
and near immediate, yeah,
we're super excited. And of course, that includes how they want to use it. Somebody wants to do that, once a year, great, right? With Customer Data Cloud, they have that option. If they want to do it 50 times a day, also great, right? Cost profile will be a little different there.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah.
But yeah, being able to scale, and of course, our business growth tends to be focused on finding enterprise companies that have complex data needs, and we may not be the best tool for the small shop on the corner that doesn't have a complex data state, and that's perfectly fine. But in cases where those things tend to overlap, we want to make sure that we can get our software to more people. So very exciting for us.
No, it's definitely important to have a lot of different flavors. I always like the comparison with an ice cream stall. Not everyone likes vanilla. Somebody wants strawberry. There needs to be something for everyone. And talking about these free trials and the people who do want to use Amperity, who do these kind of implementations. In my last episode, I was talking to the CEO of Privado, Vaibhav Antil, and they work on something called privacy engineering, which I thought was fascinating. But I asked him, I said, who are the people who are signing up for free trials or for demos with you guys? And just a test, I had a gut feeling who it would be, but he said, yeah, it's privacy officers or people working in privacy and security legal related teams. When you look at Amperity, and who are the people who are reaching out first? And there's no wrong or right answer. I'm just trying to get a feel of, because it's always an ongoing discussion. Is CDP engineering led or is it marketing led? And how do you, I mean, what's your experience with Amperity being in that case?
It's a great question. Yeah, there's not a right answer. There's not a wrong answer, but there are a lot of answers. This is something I pay pretty close attention to. Not just who's buying the software, but who's using the software, right? And the shortcut that I can give you is, if you look at the people who are using the software, they have data somewhere on their business card. And that can take a bunch of different forms. Some of them may be organized in kind of product or engineering type organizations. Some of them may be embedded in marketing. Sometimes there's kind of a Martech organization that bridges between. I don't find that there's a ton of consistency either in the names of those departments or titles or jobs or even what they actually are from company to company. But data is definitely a hot keyword. And again, no surprise, right? We're data foundational. We're working very closely to, maybe the people who are spending a lot of their day in Databricks or Snowflake, and they're responsible for getting the data right. Now, obviously, if I then go look into our campaign surface, I'm going to see a lot of marketing titles start to appear, right? And so in some sense, and this goes back to that very expansive definition of CDP, for what we do, or what the category does to kind of help solve this core data problem, that's never a problem you're solving for the sake of it. You're solving that problem to help drive results in your business. And so,
exactly, yeah.
That means marketing should be a stakeholder, analytics should be a stakeholder, support should be a stakeholder. we should be seeing that more often. And of course, media and ad tech is a whole nother space, particularly as the cookies gone away. There's been a huge increase, in the kind of correspondence between those types of use cases and CDP, and also a lot of people who are reevaluating their overall strategy on media, whether that's from a budget perspective or kind of how they use agencies and other things that they're doing, to say nothing of data monetization and other things. So, I mean, honestly, we see it all. And we should, right? Because that's what this is for, right?
Yeah.
If you build a great data foundation, you should use it everywhere in your business. And so, yes, that makes things more complex, but it's the right answer.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's one of the hotter topics I come across. I've been reading it in books like Banking on Change by a guy called Robert Lane or John Robert Lane, I can't remember, or Chung Kai Feng's Humanizing Data Strategy. Is the more people you can get involved with data or become data literate within the company, the more easy it is to implement and embed solutions like CDPs and in a successful manner. But that's, always hard debate topics. But I like the comment you made around having data in your job title or on your, on the business card is one of the more common distinctions you've seen with people approaching Amperity. Hey, listen, as the CTO, if you had to predict one major shift from a technical perspective in the way that companies manage customer data in the next 5 years, what do you think it will be?
That's a good question. I don't know that this is a bold prediction. I
love bold predictions. Oh, let's go.
I can never tell if things that seem obvious to me are obvious to everybody else. But I do think I'm having more conversations about governance in 2025 than I have in prior years. And I think I think as people continue to evolve their stacks and think about AI and think about sort of the ways that all these things can come together, I actually think governance and understanding of kind of data life cycles and things is going to be more important over the next couple of years than it's been in the past, where I think if people are being honest, they'd say they've done the minimum on that to kind of meet their core compliance obligations. But I'm seeing ambition for people to get better at this so they can better coordinate multiple systems that all need to work together. And look, I do think a lot of that is driven by AI, right? Because you've got these tools that are going to work better if you have more coherence in your data, and are going to give you more business opportunity if you can be better than your competitor around that, even if it's just for internal purposes. And then some of that, of course, will be done in expectation of more regulation coming. And I think it would be wise for everybody to expect that there will be continued expansion of regulation as AI continues to just spread like wildfire.
Yeah. Oh, I don't see that as a bold prediction. I think it's very realistic, and I have to say I'm always enamored is the word, or I'm always happy to hear that companies are thinking about data governance moving forward. There is so much data, and like you said, you've got data coming in from so many different sources. How do you make sure that you abide by all the regulations? Not necessary to avoid that fine, but to maintain that trust with your customer. That's so it's definitely not bold. I think it's very responsible, actually. And it's I think as we've reached that point where we're able to increase productivity in the usage of data, I think the next step will be to make sure that we set the right guardrails and what we're actually using that data for and what we're generating with that data. So, hey, Derek, I want to thank you. It's still lovely blue sky outside here in the Netherlands. It's everything's gone dark. We're heading up around 7:30 p.m. I'd rather be in Seattle at this moment. I want to thank you for your time and the discussion around CDC, around Amperity, where you guys are headed, where you guys came from the heart of Seattle. So thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. And happy to give you a tour of Seattle next time you come through. And
I'll take you up on that offer to see if we can see Amazon and Microsoft from that corner office there.
Absolutely. That sounds good.
Talk to you later, Derek. Bye.
All right. Cheers.